What is up, everybody? What is up? This is Dr. Andrew Kim, MD. Thank you for joining another episode of the Insomniacs Livestream. For those of you who are joining for the first time, my name is Dr. Andrew Kim. I am a board certified psychiatrist. Thank you for joining this late night episode of the Insomniacs. And we are going to be talking about friendship breakups and different aspects about friendship breakups. Very not often talked about topic. So, for those of you who are longtime listeners, for those of you who are subscribers, for those of you who are regular guests of this live stream, welcome back. I appreciate you for always tuning in. For those of you who aren't familiar, we do the Insomniacs live stream every Tuesday and Saturday night, 10:30 p.m. Central, 11:30 p.m. Eastern. But one announcement to get out of the way, this upcoming Tuesday night, because it is New Year's Eve, and I highly doubt that you want to be here sitting with me talking it up late at night versus at some New Year's get-together or party. We're not going to have the typical Tuesday night live stream. We're going to probably move it up one night to Monday night on December 30th. So that's going to be one change. We're going to have, instead of the typical Tuesday night live stream this particular week, we're going to do it on Monday night rather than Tuesday, given that we're probably going to have very low viewership if we do it on New Year's Eve when everyone wants to be partying out there. So make note of that, and I'll try to post that on my channel as well. But let's get to it. So friendship breakups. So what are we talking about? So basically what we're saying. So friendship breakups, it's probably a topic that is not highly talked about in our society, right? We, as a society, are probably much more familiar with the concept of romantic relationship breakups with a boyfriend, a girlfriend, or a divorce with a husband, a wife, right? So someone you're dating. I feel like society itself, culture in the United States, has given us a script for how to deal with romantic breakups, how to bounce back from one, heal from one, recover from one, how to deal and bounce back from a toxic romantic relationship breakup, but not so much friendships, right? We have like 10,000 movies and stereotypes and 10,000 books on how to heal, how to bounce back, but I think it's rare that you ever find a ton of books at Barnes and Nobles or at your Starbucks cafe or your local cafe about bouncing back and dealing with the ups and downs and the stress of friendship breakups. Or maybe to be less melodramatic, just the end of close friendships, right? So, first of all, right, is this even a relevant topic? Yeah, I think so. Because look, friendships develop at a very early age in our childhood. Some of them are transient and last for certain chapters of our lives, for months, for years, for weeks, even sometimes. And other ones are lifelong friendships that last forever, right? And as we're talking about these topics, I'd love for you guys to just kind of comment about your own experiences with friendships that have ended, whether they were childhood friendships, high school friendships, friendships in adulthood, lifelong ones, quick ones. I want you to throw them in the chat if you're a viewer here so that I'll get over to your comments as we go along. And again, for those of you who are interested or brave enough, you can always text that text line. I'll do some very basic screening if your topic is relevant to what we're talking about. I can have you actually phone in and we can have you chat live here on the live stream with a phone call. But look, in addition to friendships developing at an early age, I'm not going to cite and quote these. These are very obvious, guys. If you don't believe this, then you probably don't have faith in humanity. Okay, numerous studies have been done over the years. These psychosocial studies done in psychology journals, psychiatry journals, anthropology journals that friendships have numerous benefits. They can be a source of social support, emotional support. They can enhance just kind of your overall well-being, contribute to your abstract sense of existential fulfillment in life, meaning in life, purpose, etc. Right? So, and we talked even in our most recent episodes and other episodes on relationships, the universal struggle with loneliness, right? So I'm not going to belabor that, but as human beings, the vast majority, if not almost all of us, struggle with loneliness. And obviously, this is a way that we can meet that need or address the need and that void of loneliness is through platonic friendships, right? And If you want stats, I'll give you stats, right? The age of marriage in the United States and the UK has been increasing in recent years in the past decade. Now, like the average age of marriage is now into the 30s. So friendships may be that social support, that social fabric that we lean on for even longer periods compared to generations of the past, right? 2/3 of adults in the United States say, like, friendship is one of the most crucial things, when it comes to their own subjective sense of, you know, their meaning in life, their fulfillment in life. So friendships are definitely important. NP, thanks. NP's here saying good topic. Yeah, it is a relevant topic. So, well, let's lay the framework. Then we'll get into this concept of friendships ending. So, what makes the framework of platonic friendships and romantic relationships somewhat different, right? They're not like totally alien or exclusive of one another, but friendships, especially early on, right? Platonic friendships, let's just be real, right? Predate romantic bonding, right? That's just how it is, right? So these form earlier in life, oftentimes form due to, as rudimentary as it sounds, proximity, right? We live in the same neighborhood, and neighborhood kids form bonds. We're forced to be in a school, and we have classmates who we sit next to that we're at recess with, that we're in class for 6, 7, 8 hours with, right? So just by the nature of forced proximity, we tend to create these bonds, right? We form bonds around similar interests. We're playing basketball together at recess. We like riding bikes around the neighborhood. We're both part of some extracurricular activity on the Little League baseball team, whatever it may be. Proximity, interests. We're somewhat dependent on our guardians, our parents, our grandparents, whoever put us in those positions to hang out with certain people. So sometimes it may be like, well, you're the same 5 people I see 3 times a week, so I guess we're going to become buds, right? So, and look, but there is an importance to this rather than just focusing on my comment of like kind of this forced proximity or exposure to each other. I do believe as human beings, right? We want validation, not just from our parents, not just from family members or your aunt or your uncle. We want to get validation from similar aged peers, right? That same peer group, other students, right? Other friends in the neighborhood, etc. We want validation from our peers, not just from our parents. We're like, well, it's because they love me. They got to say this about me, right? I want to hear an honest opinion from someone else who's not in my family unit. Friendships serve as a mirror or like a guide in our lives early on, which is somewhat different, right? Versus kind of this, we almost have a goal in mind when we're forming romantic bonds. I want to see where this goes to see if we're going to be long-term partners. I'm looking for a wife. I'm looking for a husband. I'm looking for a fling, right? It's almost like a goal-oriented mindset to some degree when we're just like purposefully, intentionally going into, these romantic relationships. I'm not saying there's no goals for, platonic relationships, but I'm just saying they're somewhat different. The frameworks are a little bit different. Now, another thing, and this part I do want to harp on a little bit because this will become relevant when we're talking about the dissolution or ending of platonic friendships. And it's an interesting point, right? And something that I've kind of taken for granted and really never put too much thought into, but friendships at the core of it, right, are not monogamous in nature. I know it might sound like an obvious statement, but think about that, right? When we enter a romantic relationship, well, in this day and age, in the year 2024, about to be 2025, I guess, it's a little bit different, right? I think people will disagree with me and say, well, it doesn't have to be monogamous, but let's be real, okay? The vast majority of romantic relationships, for most people, have a framework or the concept that I'm entering a monogamous, exclusive relationship when we're getting very serious with our dating. When we're married, that's a little bit more concrete about monogamy and exclusivity. But that's not the case with friendships, right? And that's where some issues can arise, right? So just keep that in mind as we talk about some of the other concepts moving forward. Okay. So, last couple things, I think it's also interesting to point out maybe some, and again, some of these are going to sound like almost like stereotypical tropes, but look, there's limited research out there about friendships, but from what I could gather, like there were definitely multiple studies that were done. A lot of the research, interestingly, is done kind of in elementary school, junior high, high school students. There's not a ton. There's not as much, really well done studies like in adulthood, but from these early age school studies, they tended to see differences in friendship dynamics amongst genders, meaning, again, very general statements. I know this is not going to be applicable to everybody, but see if this resonates with you. Females tended to make friends in pairs, meaning like having more of these like multiple one on one closer friendships, where males tended to have these kind of like larger, denser groups of friends where like friends were friends of friends, right? And the people in the group were almost all mutually friends together, almost kind of this like group mentality or herd mentality, right? And a high school study out there indicated, females were at that age range, like, 14 to 18, were really focusing on building and developing bonds that had an emphasis on emotional support, closeness, where males were, creating these bonds mainly around centered on recreational commonality, right? Common interests and sports and things that they were kind of interested in as a group, kind of again, that herd mentality, right? So even kind of the mindset of what was driving some of that bond building in that high school range seemed to differ. And going back to that concept of like more one on one kind of relationships versus kind of that group herd mentality of the males, like females tended to hold their friends to a higher standard to some degree when it came to the expectations of loyalty, expectations of the emotional support that they should be receiving from each individual friend in that friend network. And again, to some degree, a little bit more expectation about some degree of monogamy might be too strong of a word, but just kind of a little bit of that like exclusivity of, we have this kind of unique exclusive bond with one another that no one else can replicate kind of mindset, which males didn't have as much of. Again, these are broad sweeping statements, right? So this is not going to be applicable to everyone out there, right? Um, and those things, those differences, I'm not even putting judgment on it, good, bad. I'm just saying those were some differences and observations that were noted. But that also kind of relates to this next comment I'm going to make, and then we'll get to some of the comments here in the chat. It also meant that females in the kind of that high school range where this study was done also reported probably more intense loneliness, sadness, difficulty getting over anger, more distress from an ending of a friendship compared to men when friendships ended. Okay. Again, not necessarily a bad or good thing, but I'm going to make an assumption. This is my opinion. Is there's probably also more introspection occurring post friendship in the female gender, where men, I don't know, maybe I could be wrong, making a stereotypical judgment about men, maybe a little bit less carved out intentionality about reflecting on why the friendship ended, what it means, the ramifications of that, versus just kind of moving on and plowing forward. I could be wrong, but I'm going to infer a little bit from what I read there. So let's, before we move on to the next topic, Starry, thank you, Starry, for joining again. Starry says, my friend and I were very close for 6 years. It's sad, and I think we both learned not to mix business with friendship. We both didn't care about the money, but fell out over expectations. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, that's a tricky one. That's a tricky one, right? I didn't even actually have that on my list of bullet points later when we're going to talk about, different reasons that are often cited as some of the top reasons of, friendships coming to an end. But yeah, it's almost like a cliche phrase we hear, right? Don't mix money and friendship. Don't mix money and family. Like we hear kind of those colloquialisms quite a bit, Starry, right? So yeah, no, that's, obviously I'm sorry to hear, but it sounds like there were lessons learned from that, moving forward. And that topic is relevant too. We're going to talk about, is there an opportunity about lessons learned for future friendships, right? So, so no, I appreciate you sharing. So keep those comments flowing in for those of you who are watching. We got several viewers here. So interestingly, kind of citing more of the literature here, right? So, they have tried to study kind of reasons, right? Reasons for friendships ending. Um, and look, not all friendships, when I say the words friendship breakup, right? Friendship breakups don't always have to be painful or melodramatic or coming straight out of some like Kardashian episode, right? With fights and melodrama, right? Sometimes bonds fade for a variety of reasons, right? They actually did do a study of adults because I want to make sure this is relevant, right? I've been citing some like junior high school studies, but like they have done some studies of adults like in their 20s, young adults, kind of entering that independent phase of life. And the five most common cited reason for same-sex platonic friendships ending were literally, again, this is how mundane and rudimentary it could be. Just we literally live farther apart, so there was literally less physical proximity. Something as basic as that was one of the top reasons. uh, this one's a little bit more direct: not liking the friend anymore, finding them annoying, finding that if anything, there's more negatives than positives of what they bring to the table in our mutual bond. Almost kind of this fading phenomenon, right? Not necessarily this pointed, you're annoying me, you're angering me. Just we just aren't hanging out as much. We're not talking as much. There's less interaction. Another category that was very commonly cited was they use this phrase interference from other relationships, meaning one of the two parties or both, were in a more serious romantic relationship. They were now married, had kids, maybe had to take a caregiver role for someone ill in their family, which, obviously changed their priorities. So they used the vague term interference from other relationships, but totally makes sense, right? I think all of us can relate to various chapters in our life where changes of circumstances would happen in different relationship dynamics, even outside your actual friendship where the friendship ended, right? Um, and then finally, I know this is vague too, but friendships just kind of fizzling out naturally, for lack of a better term. No specific index, argument, conflict, fight, huge disagreement, or in Starry's example, like a business issue, right? Just things just kind of fizzled out naturally, right? And last comment on that, right? It seemed like proximity, right? Like the living or being further apart physically, that seemed to have the most impact on casual friendships, right? The friendships that you would say, this is not my BFF or my best friend, but just the more looser friendships, the physical distance seemed to have the most impact on those. Makes total sense to me from a logical standpoint. And while the closer friendships, your close friends, your best friends, were most likely to end due to either just less interaction because the maintenance wasn't there, right? Intentionality and effort wasn't being put into, and less interaction was literally happening, or because of the more obvious one, just changes in circumstances with other relationships, marriage, having kids, etc. And that makes sense. I don't think there's anything surprising from that. But let's go over some of the more dramatic, uh, some of the more dramatic endings of friendship. And this is where I'll add Starry's comment to my list because I didn't have it here. Right, breaking of trust, right? Some kind of trust violation, or let's just make it broader, boundary violation. An actual specific conflict and the inability to move on and reconcile after conflict occurs. I know this sounds obvious, but look, we go back to the episode we did about toxic relationships, right? When we say the word toxic relationship, we often, again, we've been trained by society, right? We hear the word toxic relationship, our minds automatically go to a toxic boyfriend, a toxic girlfriend, toxic wife, husband, right? I shared in that episode we did on the live stream about toxic relationships, about the toxic marriage I used to be in my first marriage, right? But I mentioned in that episode as well, there can be toxic non romantic relationships, right? There can be toxic bosses, there can be toxic coworkers, and there can be toxic friendships, right? And what we, again, I don't want to repeat the whole episode of the previous live stream. Snicks is here. Thanks. Snicks says hello to everyone in the chat. Hello, Snicks. We're talking about toxic friendships at this juncture of our topic today. So toxic friendships, right? I mean, what could they look like? They can look like folks who, we use the term in our other live stream episode, like energy vampires, right? Or they're always just kind of dumping on you and just unloading all of their emotions and their traumas, and it's really a one-way directional street, right? It's take, and not providing you with support, not providing you with validation, or they could be manipulative, literally, right? There could be manipulation. They're literally using you. There could be some traits of sociopathy, right? So, and we can go on and on. I mean, we can go through the various subtypes of toxic friendships, but right, I mean, I'm sure at this juncture, some of you listeners out there can say, oh yeah, I've had an unhealthy platonic friendship. I've had a toxic friendship, right? So that's another more kind of dramatic ending versus some of these more natural endings we talked about, right? So breaking of trust, boundary violations, toxic relationships, conflict resolution gone awry, and that topic we talked about earlier, right? And so I want to circle back to what I said, right? We said the framework of romantic relationships and platonic relationships are a little bit different. And going back to that concept of monogamy, there is this concept. Again, we've been trained to think romantically when we talk about relationships, but this concept of, for lack of a better term, like friendship jealousy. How many of you can relate to this? I'm just curious. How many of you listeners right now? I could see that there's at least 8 of you, 9 of you right now listening. How many of you can relate to this concept? I'm not saying it doesn't have to be happening right now in your life, but at some juncture in your life, in childhood, junior high, high school, as an adult, college, whatever. How many of you have experienced friendship jealousy, right? Even though there wasn't some written contract, like a marriage certificate, like we're partners and we're exclusive, there was almost an expectation. Hey, like I thought we had something unique and it was just you and me. Like then I see you having a blast over here with that friend. How come you're posting all these things on your Insta, right? That's how the cool kids say it, Insta instead of saying Instagram. It's Insta, with that friend. You don't do that for me. Hey, when we went to that restaurant, you didn't post a single picture. You went to that restaurant with this person, you put 5, right? So fascinatingly, right, there is this weird concept, right? I mean, just think about it. I mean, I've probably gone through it as well. Like there's like this interesting concept of friendship jealousy, right? And we don't really talk about that much, right? It's kind of a weird, I think people feel weird to talk about it because they're almost like, if I talk about this, I'm going to be seen as insecure by my friends, or I'm going to be seen as insecure by whoever I'm sharing this to. But it happens, right? It happens. See, look at this. For the people listening, I see some Snick says 100%, Andy says 100%, Kevin says yes. So I'm telling you, this is human nature, right? There is this concept of friendship jealousy that occurs, and sometimes that could be the seed, or like that sows the seed of like resentment, doubt, insecurity that can start forming cracks in the foundation of a friendship. So just an interesting thing. So yeah, and I'm gonna kind of move on to the next topic. But for those of you who said 100%, like as I'm talking here, throw in some comments. I'm just curious to see like what were the aspects of jealousy, right? Or what were the aspects of the comparison and contrast that was at the core of what was leading to some of those feelings. I'm just very curious. I'm very curious. So now the next topic I want to talk about, which I also think is a very interesting topic when it comes to friendships and friendships ending, is, let me pose this to you, right? And I'm going to preface this. I already know the answer, okay? The boring the boring generic answer is it's going to depend. So I already know the answer. It's going to depend, and it's going to be case by case depending on the friendship, right? So let's say, right, I'm curious, and I think this is going to be somewhat dependent on the friendship, but I think it's also going to be somewhat dependent on generations, maybe I'm wrong on that. Let's say this is not a friendship um, that has the natural fizzle out, the natural fade. You kind of see the writing on the wall. This friendship is kind of winding down, and it's not what it used to be, right? There's this interesting concept of like friendship downgrades or upgrades, right? Both directions, downgrade, upgrade, right? Like this person I used to consider them my best friend. Now they're a friend, right? They used to be my friend. Now we used to be friends, but it's just they were in my chapter of my life, right? So there's this concept, right? And I think that's fine. There's fluidity in life, right? Our bonds can change. It doesn't take away from the fact that we used to have a good time, that we had very meaningful memories together, that they were an important part of your life and they left a positive imprint. But things can change, right? But what I'm getting at next is about the concept of when you know that it's just kind of done, like our friendship is just, it's not what it is anymore, and I want to end this. A little bit more of one of those scenarios where it's intentional. The question is to ghost or not to ghost? To ghost or not to ghost? And I've heard all variety of answers from people I've interacted with. I'm not even talking about doctor patient, like when I talk to my patients. I'm just saying people in my life, to ghost or not to ghost. I think we talk about that more when it comes to dating, and I think that's very prevalent and relevant in this day and age when we're doing a lot of online dating, right? I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot of ghosting that happens when it comes to people who meet on Match.com. Or I'm so old at this point, guys. I don't know what Coffee Meets Bagel, whatever the latest dating app is, right? You go on date number 1 or date number 2, and you're like, I'm not feeling this. And then what happens? Instead of saying, you know what, I don't think this is, working out. I had a good time, but I don't want to go out for another date. Like we do a lot of ghosting in society now. I know that's highly relevant, but how about for friendships? How about for friendships that you know or maybe want to end? Like, let's say you are in that position where you're like, I actually want to end this friendship. Like, it's just not what it is. This chapter of my life, we're not going to be friends. Would you ghost, or would you actually have that conversation face to face or on the phone to have that discussion with someone? To say, like, I don't want this dragged out, and like I don't want them to keep thinking, to have the expectation we're going to keep hanging out. Like, I want to end this. I know that could be a quite awkward, quite tense or emotional conversation. Would you ghost or not ghost? Kevin, a few people are chiming in. Kevin, thanks for joining again. Kevin says, no, I would never ghost. Be honest. Yeah. I hear you, Kevin. I think there is something to be said about going through an open conversation. I'm not saying it's going to be a pleasant conversation, but I think you have the opportunity to be honest, and you also have the opportunity to learn through the tension and the emotions and the awkwardness. Snicks, thank you for chiming in. Snicks says, ghosting is cowardly, but sometimes necessary. Yeah, I hear you. And that's why, Snicks, you didn't hear me say there's an absolute right answer, because and I know this is going to be an extreme example, right? But Snicks, you have a point. What if it was a toxic relationship? I don't know that there's a need to have to somehow always confront someone who's been toxic to you, right? I think sometimes it's even healthier just cut things off ASAP, immediately, and run the hell away and be 100 miles away from that person, right? What if it was an abusive relationship? I don't think you owe them much of anything. I think you owe yourself to be healthy and safe, right? I mean, so again, I know that's an extreme example, but you're right. There's going to be obviously less toxic forms of what I just said, where even there is going to be nuance, Snicks, and sometimes ghosting isn't, right? Andy's been a long time listener. I appreciate it. Ghosting feels wrong. but it's just too easy. all, you, all you have to do is nothing. Well, that part, yeah, that you've nailed it. I don't disagree with that at all. It is the easiest thing to do, is the path of least resistance, right? And as human beings, I'm including myself, guys, right? I'm not immune to this, right? I'm saying, as human beings, what are we as human beings, right? We are pain averse. Anyone who disagrees with me on that, like, you just don't understand human nature. We are pain averse. Even as a kid, before you know much of anything, you touch a hot thing, you pull your hand away immediately. It's reflexive, it's instinctual. I am telling you, we are wired to avoid adversity and pain and discomfort. We are wired for that, guys. It's not a bad thing, right? I'm just saying that's how it is. And we are also hedonistic. If we weren't hedonistic, we wouldn't have all these vices that are prevalent, right, in life. We do what feels good, and we take the path of least resistance, right? Starry, no, very valid point. Starry brings up a very valid point too. Starry says sometimes you get super busy with major things and lose the friendship. It's like you both ghost each other. Absolutely. And I think that goes into that category of, again, non-judgmental, non-pejorative, like just things faded, right? That's the fizzle out category, right? There was no animosity toward each other. I can tell you right now, I have friendships where, I know my friend's busy with his multiple kids. I'm busy with my career, my family, my kid. It's like both of us mutually barely have time to eat something and maybe an hour of free time and then go to bed, right? so, so it happens, right? And we don't have animosity towards each other. If anything, if either of us had some intentionality and we're like, hey man, let's go out for a bite to eat, I think both of us would be like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So sometimes it does, like I said, we don't have to categorize friendships ending as always being some kind of melodramatic, animosity filled breakup per se, right? Absolutely. And Snicks also adds in, I've told some dates nicely why I didn't want to date them, and they appreciated it. Yeah. So I'm gonna read you one thing real quick, right? I don't want to always inundate you guys with stats, but since I think this is relevant just because of the ghosting is so relevant these days. There was a journal that did a study of 18 to 25-year-olds who had ghosted a friend to end a friendship, and they were asked what were the most common reasons or motivations for ghosting. And I'm just going to read it off verbatim so I don't get this wrong. It says, most common motivations for ghosting it was a toxic friendship or unhealthy friendship. There was just simply a loss of interest to want to keep maintaining the friendship. They found that friend that they ghosted annoying. Another reason was self-preservation. That's kind of vague. Not sure. I'm assuming there's some unhealthiness there. And someone had overstepped their boundaries or a break of trust. Okay. And interestingly, they did try to, examine the person that was ghosted. And the person that was ghosted, I don't think this is a huge surprise, but the person that was ghosted felt sadness, frustration, hurt, rejected, confused, right? And in response to that, the people who did the ghosting said that, they felt that they had to, because ghosting was the best form of defense to not get pulled into more emotional turmoil and tension and drama. And others cited that they felt like an actual honest, straightforward conversation or some type of confrontation would be pointless or useless. So, even though I don't disagree with Kevin, right? I think honesty is probably a good way to go. Some people just cited that, yeah, even if they felt that way, they just felt like it would kind of be a fruitless endeavor. And they just felt this was as Andy said, right, path of least resistance, right? So what would be some just basic tips, right? Tips of, let's say a friendship ends And I'm being broad here, right? I'm not saying just for the ones where there was some melodrama or trust being broken or toxicity. I'm just saying in general, a friendship ends. And let's say we're talking not that casual friendship, but I'm saying a close friend or someone that maybe at one point was a best friend, right? When one of those types of friendships end, how do you heal and how do you kind of recover and how do you deal with the mixed bag of emotions one is likely to experience after going through that? Okay, we'll go through it briefly, right? I think, look, we have so many books and tips and videos out there about healing and your journey to healing and recovery after a breakup or a divorce. I would say a lot of those things are still going to apply to a platonic friendship. Okay, so I'm going to be brief because you've heard a lot of these things, but I think it's just going to be odd, right? Sometimes maybe to think about this in the context of a platonic friendship, but let's just walk through it. Number one, right? Acknowledge your feelings. Acknowledge that you might feel angry, hurt, confused, betrayed. You might feel relieved. Let's be real. You might feel relieved. So even acknowledge that you feel relieved. Why do you feel relieved? Examine that. But it's important to stop, pause, and know what the heck are you feeling? If you can't even do that, all the subsequent steps I'm going to list, it's going to be hard to bear much fruit. So it's got to first start with mindfulness, being in tune with yourself, and just acknowledge what is it that you are actually feeling. Because it could be any of the above, right? Let's not get into this overly sappy, like it's just going to be mourning and grief. You might be like, oh, thank God. Like, I should have done that a while ago. Or this is the healthiest thing for me. But it also could be all of the above. It could be a mix of all those emotions. But it's important to stop, pause, and think about that. I also think it's also important to acknowledge and understand what that loss of that friendship or that bond means to you. And how is that going to impact your life? Okay. Because understanding that will help you with adaptation. What is the void that you are now recognizing is there because of this friendship being gone? And that's going to look different for everyone, right? I mean, it could be, well, now I feel like I've lost this abstract bond and loneliness has become more of a factor. To be more concrete, they were my running partner. They were someone who would help me and watch my kids. And what am I going to do now? I need some extra child care help. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like literally from A to Z, concrete to abstract to existential. Assess that void and the loss. And what does that mean to you? What does that mean to your daily routine? What does that mean to you in terms of how you view fulfillment in your life? From A to Z, concrete to abstract. Understand the loss. Understand what void is now there. And it's okay to acknowledge there is a void, because if you don't, trust me, if you don't and you neglect it and you ignore it, it's going to be filled. I don't care what anyone says, it's going to be filled. It's going to be filled with a toxic relationship. It's going to be filled with you making a rash decision about a romantic relationship. It's going to be filled with drinking. It's going to be filled with drugs. It's going to be filled with food. It's going to be filled with something, guys. But the better you can wrap your head around it, better you can acknowledge it, more likely then you're going to be able to fill it with something healthy versus unhealthy, right? Acceptance is also important. I know that sounds very general, but I'm saying I'm going to be very specific, right? I'm going to be very specific to the concept that Starry and some others brought up. I think we all have this idea of closure, right? I want to have that confrontation. I want to have that conversation to just feel like there's quote unquote closure, cause and effect. Our minds work this way. Our minds as humans, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. We want the puzzle pieces to fit. It's all got to make sense like a math formula. This plus this equals this. And this is why we're no longer friends. Sometimes it's murky and it's vague. like I said, like Starry said, sometimes you got busy and things faded, right? And maybe you can have that conversation and have quote unquote closure by acknowledging, hey, we're, look, we're just both busy. We don't have as much time to hang out as much. And, um, you know, it is what it is. But hey, whenever we get a chance to talk or hang out, I'm here for you, right? And maybe that's enough closure. Other times, it may be even murkier than that. You're not even sure. And that person may ghost you. Let's say we talked about ghosting other people and should you ghost or not, but let's say it's reverse. Let's say you are the ghosted person. That is going to be a scenario where you're not going to get the closure. And that's what I'm referring to when I'm saying acceptance. Right? You may have been the person who was ghosted, right? And again, you might have said, well, whatever, who cares? That's easier for me. And you might be okay with it, but others may not. Like I said, studies have shown a lot of people aren't okay with being the one who is ghosted, right? And you may never get that answer and that clarity of what the heck happened. I thought things were going okay. I've been there for you. I'm offended because I'm ghoster. And says, yes, ghoster versus the ghostee. Exactly. So I don't even know if that's the right term. It makes sense to me. So, but you may have to exhibit some radical acceptance. I may never have all the answers. I may never have total clarity, even though my heart desires to know who was right, who was wrong, who won, who lost, right? That's what I'm talking about. Come on. That's human nature. I want to know that I'm right, they're wrong, I'm justified. That's injustice. That's what we want. Don't lie. Don't lie. That's what we want. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying that's what we want. We're humans. I'm human. You're human. That's what we want. You may not get that, though. You may not get the clarity. You may not get absolute certainty. So there may be a need to practice some degree of radical acceptance that it is what it is. And ruminating on this, stewing in it, probably is not going to be healthy, honestly. So there's going to be a need for acceptance and adaptation, right? And at the end of this, why? Why bother? And then we'll stop with that. Then let's get into anecdotes after this, right? Now that we got through kind of the hot topic educational piece, right? Why do all this? Why acknowledge your feelings? Why try to understand the loss, the void, practicing radical acceptance? What the heck is the point of it? Well, look, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for reflection and growth. You can learn. What can you learn from this? What can you take away? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn maybe even more about what you value in this chapter of your life? This chapter is probably different than the last chapter. What did you learn about what you want moving forward in the next friendship or a different version of this friendship, right? What did you learn from the shattered fantasies? And I know that's weird, right? Because when we say fantasies, we think about romantic relationships. Trust me, don't lie. You, me, people you know have fantasies even about platonic friendships. I always envision that, I'd be married and I have these 3 kids, and then my friends would live in the neighborhood and we'd have these neighborhood barbecues and we'd crack a beer on the porch and their kids would run over and our kids would run over to theirs and it'd be an open door policy. Trust me, don't lie. There's even fantasies that get shattered about platonic friendships. And that's what I'm referring to: loss, void, mourning, grief. There's even a loss of the fantasy, right? So, what did you learn from even processing the loss of the fantasies of what could have been? And yes, Nick says learning to vet people better. That could be a lesson. That could be. Part of it could be vetting people. When do you decide to lower your walls of vulnerability, to take a risk, to trust, right? That could be part of it. There could be all kinds of lessons that could be learned, right? But what did you learn and take away? Because and the last thing here is this. I know it sounds corny, right? You've heard these bullet points, right? Like, I'm not saying anything revolutionary. Acknowledge your feelings, understand, adapt, accept. What can you learn? But this is the truth, right? Everything we do in life, every day, there are hundreds of micro decisions that we make every single day. Micro decisions are made every single day. But when a friendship ends, I would say that's more than a micro decision, especially for close friendships. You have an opportunity to do something healthy or unhealthy when an important friendship ends. You can allow the seeds of negativity to get planted. And when I say seeds of negativity, right, I think it's going to be dependent on you and that friendship. The seeds of negativity could be, well, that just shows I'm a loser. Nobody likes me. I screwed up. There's something wrong with me. I'm bad. I'm a bad friend. Right? And who knows? The truth is, maybe you did do something hurtful. Maybe you did break trust, whatever it may be. But a moment and an error in judgment, something maybe you could have improved upon, skill sets you could have maybe have sharpened. None of those things define you in totality as a human being. But that's how it can feel in that moment, right? So you have the opportunity to ruminate and nurture the seeds of insecurity and doubt and self-loathing, or you can nurture learning and growing and have a growth mindset to take something away from this experience, whether it ended with pain and hurt or whether it was a natural fading, whatever it may be. There is an opportunity to learn regardless. So what are you going to do? Are you going to take the path of intentionality with a growth mindset, or are you going to nurture the seeds of insecurity, doubt, self-loathing, self-hatred? You have a chance. You have a chance in the midst of pain to do something. Right? Right? And it's also an interesting concept too, right? To rekindle a friendship. I mean, look, come on, guys, for God's sake, right? We've had people who date, break up, date again, marry, divorce, remarry. Right? I mean, if JLo can do it, why can't we? Right? So, so I'm saying, I bet you at minimum one of you who are listening right now, you've had a friendship, you went through a chapter of turmoil, you weren't friends, maybe you became friends again, but maybe the dynamics were different. Maybe they were the same and it was like the same old, right? But there's even an opportunity. Maybe there is a chance that you can be friends again in a later context and your paths may cross again. Maybe they won't. All I'm saying is, this is the beauty of life, right? They do. Snicks asked, do people rekindle friendships? Yeah. I believe so. Well, we can disagree, Snicks. That's the beauty of life too. We can disagree. You know, I would say I don't think it's super common, but I think so. I think whether we want to call it rekindle versus reconnect versus repair, I think that's a matter of perspective. But yeah, I do believe there are some times where even after, let's say, a breaking of trust type of friendship, I've seen it happen. I've seen people genuinely become friends again. So I do think it's possible. I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's super common, but I think it's possible. I do think it's possible. So, okay. So we've gone through some of those hot topics, but look, as people in the last few minutes here, we'll talk for another 5-10 minutes since we got several people in the chat today and it's a little bit lively. You know, keep sending comments about any of the topics we talked about, but let's talk anecdotes. Let's hear about some of your personal topics, right? I mean, look, off the top of my head, I've had a wide variety. I'm sure like all of you have had a wide variety, right? I got a friend right now. You know, his name is Alvin. Like we've been friends since the 3rd grade. Now I'm 42 years old and we're somehow, by the grace of God, we're still good friends. But I will tell you this. I can say without a doubt, my friend Alvin, what is amazing about him is that he lives right now in the DC area. I live here in the Chicago area. Is that he exhibits this very stalwart consistency of intentionality, right? Intentionality to stay connected with me, a few other close friends he has here in Illinois, like very intentional, saying, hey, you're important to me. I value you as a friend. The few times I am over there, I want to make sure we hang out and that we spend some time together. It's important to me that we get to see each other, right? Sometimes almost verbatim. I mean, I'm paraphrasing a little bit. And I'm fortunate. I'm really fortunate, that I have a friend who has that level of intentionality and clear communication, right? Like, and I actually look, I can say for myself in all honesty, right? You know, there's been guilt at times because I don't know that I've exhibited the same level of, intentionality to always want to connect. Like, not that I don't want to, it's just more just like making sure I'm carving out the time and energy and with clarity, with as much clarity and intentionality as he does. Like, yeah, let's do it. Let's make sure like we have that, like on this date when you're back for X amount of days, or I'm going to go out there to see you. But you know what? It's interesting though, because I think as I've gotten past the age of 40, my circle of close friends dwindled to very few people, which I'm actually okay with. But I think it opened my eyes to be like, well, why has this particular bond stayed so close over the years? And I realized, look, man, he has put in so much effort to make sure, to value this. And I've been making much more of an effort in the last the last 1 or 2 years I want to, I'm like, you know what? He deserves that mutual respect of that same level of intentionality. I have the desire and I value the friendship, but I haven't been really exhibiting that. So we've been very fortunate to still stay connected from third freaking grade. And I'm sure you guys got stories out there like that, right? I'll share another one after I read a few comments. Andy says, within the last year, I reconnected with someone I drifted from years ago. And it's been great. Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear that. And see, that's so Snick. See, there's an example right there. One of the listeners, right? I'm not blowing smoke as a psychiatrist, just saying some positivity, right? Some kind of delusional positivity. People do reconnect with others. Right? Thanks for sharing, Andy. Here's a different example, right? I had a friend back in the day. Oh, geez, this is maybe more like high schoolish, and kind of like what I said, kind of the herd mentality, right? Like we started growing this circle of friends where, you know, uh, this one close friend and he introduced me to his friend. We became close. Then this other friend of mine joined the circle. Then one of those guys had one of their friends, and it was kind of this herd mentality. We're all friends of friends. And then one of those guys, just out of the blue, after years with an S, years of friendship, just like vocalized, like, yeah, I'm cutting those people out of my life. And then we were all like, what? Like, what? Right? But we're so confused and just kind of, it was almost like the opposite spectrum of ghosted, right? It's like I'm just no longer gonna be friends with any of you. Like, I mean, like concretely vocalized. And they actually meant it. and so we're just like, okay. I think it was more confusion at first. And then after just confusion, there was this like, I would say acceptance isn't the right term. It was just kind of this like, it is what it is kind of mentality. And then over time, I think amongst internal gossip amongst the circle of friends that remain friends, then it just kind of became almost like a punchline. That punchline's not the right word, like a punching bag of animosity of like, hey, remember that guy? What a dick, right? And so look, so I it's both ends of the spectrum, right? Like one of the more storybook happy, like I can't believe I'm friends with one of my close friends from third grade till now, right? To yeah, I had someone just literally say that we're not gonna be friends anymore, and just kind of almost like dumped, I guess, as a group of friends, as a herd, just like no longer, right? And so it happens, guys, right? I mean, this is human nature, and this is what we go through. It's just a topic that we don't really talk about too much. So, all right. Well, last call for, you know, any of your experiences. I'd love to hear any others. So Andy and Snicks and Starry, everyone who's kind of come in and out has shared a few things. But what else have you gone through? What else have you seen? Whether it's about ghosting, not ghosting, toxic friendships that have ended, natural fading of friendships. Do you think that's BS with men, bonding over recreational activities and hobbies and having more of a herd or group mentality versus women who tend to have more of those singular, individual, discrete pods of pairs of close friends? I think it also changes with age. You know, back in college, high school, I was always in groups of friends. And then, from my 20s onward, I think, right now I could say I got, I don't know, 5 friends maybe, if even. And of those 5, like, you know, 3 of them live out of state and I almost never see them, but they're the type of friends where we could literally pick up. We could literally pick up as if, from the last conversation when we hung out in person from years ago. We just kind of pick up when we hang out. So Snick says their friends from high school have a herd mentality, like a group mentality, and they're not nice people. Yeah, no, no. Yeah, and that's we didn't really get into it today, right? But when there's those group mentality dynamics, there's different, right? I mean, it could be a whole topic in itself, right? There's almost kind of this peer pressure of conformity, right? Why are you the oddball out? We all like this one interest, or we all do this thing as our routine, or this is where we go to eat at this time. Oh, we always do this. We always have a nightcap after drinking. How come you're not going? Don't be a party pooper. Don't be a loser, right? So, you're right. So even with whether it's male or female, it doesn't matter. I don't think it's gender specific. There are interesting dynamics when it comes to like those group dynamics of friends, right? Which can be a topic in itself. Andy says true friends can go long periods of time without connecting and pick up right where they're left. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm curious. Right? I'm curious. For the ladies who are on the chat right now, I know for men this is true, right? I mean, again, I don't think this is unique to men, but like I just hear it from men more often. Maybe that's the best way to put it, right? Like Andy says to me, true friends can just like pick up where they last left off in their conversation. And I hear that from men all the time. I mean, I live it. I have 3 friends from med school. I don't think we've seen each other in person for like years, but like we could pick up like a text chain, or maybe off chance when we run into each other when like someone's in someone else's city for a conference, we could just go out for a dinner and like we're just picking up as if we had our last conversation back in like residency or med school from like a decade ago. Like, so I know I can do that with my male friends, and Andy saying he could do it with his, and I hear this all the time from men, but like ladies, like, is that the same? Like, I mean, do you, I know this is a small sample size of hearing from a few listeners, but it's like, is that the same with your close friends where like you've maybe had close friends, you live far apart, or maybe you don't even necessarily live super far apart, but because of circumstances and busyness, like, it's hard to have a monthly hangout, or even a quarterly hangout. Could you maybe randomly text here and there, maybe have a phone call once or twice a year, and then meet in person and literally pick up where you're left, like right where you left off? Or is that not something you experience in your lives? I'm asking as a man. I'm asking as a man. It's not like sociology, anthropology is my specialty, right? So even though I'm a psychiatrist, right, it's not like I'm sitting here taking surveys of these things. So I hear that from men all the time, anecdotally. Is that the same? Is that true for you, ladies and women who are either here on the live chat or those who are hearing this on a recording? If you're hearing this on a recording after it's posted after the live stream, put in your comments. Is that something that you feel is applicable to you as well? I'm super curious. I'd actually like to hear that, because I haven't really heard that a lot. maybe I don't talk to enough women. So, I mean, I don't know. Um, all right, guys. Well, I appreciate you guys joining for another episode of the Insomniacs. It was a lot. I appreciate you guys, especially you regular. It's very Snick says yes with one woman. Yes, okay, yeah. That's. I was just curious. So it seems like yeah, definitely. I'm glad. Thank you for sharing, Snick. So Snick says yes, definitely with one person in their life. So I appreciate you guys joining. Hopefully it was interesting, interesting topic because we always kind of hear this topic in the context of romance and romantic relationships. I thought it would be a nice change of pace to maybe talk about this in platonic friendships. But for those of you who are regular listeners, thank you for joining in as usual, for being up this late with me, who just can't sleep at night and drink too much caffeine. So, and for those of you who are first time listeners, I appreciate you for tuning in. And like I said, as a reminder, due to New Year's Eve, not going to be doing the usual Tuesday night. So we're going to do Monday night. Okay, so be on the lookout. I'll try to put something on the playlist, hopefully, soon by tomorrow so that you could bookmark it and stuff. But it'll be Monday night. We'll do Monday night, 10:30 Central, 11:30 Eastern for the next episode. So try to think up another fun one because it's the end of the year. We'll probably just do something. Yeah, it doesn't hurt to be cheesy and positive, guys. So might just do an end of the year reflection. Maybe hear about, I don't. I think it's weird sometimes to always have like New Year's resolutions, almost like this, like you know this goal that's like this sacred goal. But like let's be cheesy. Let's talk about what are some of the goals entering 2025, or maybe reflections on 2024. I'll probably come up with some kind of cheesy topic like that. It's good to be cheesy once in a while. It's good to do some introspection. So we'll probably do something about reflecting on this past year, motivation and goals for the upcoming year. It's good for us to vent and talk to each other and bond together about goals and things we aspire for. So we'll probably do something very positive to bring in the new year together for our final episode of 2024. So until next time, guys, I hope you guys have a good night. For those of you, I still see some of you listening to me, so make sure you get some sleep tonight. Think about some of those motivations and goals for 2025. Have a good night, guys. Get some rest, and we'll talk in a couple days on Monday. So thank you again for tuning in. Have a good night, everybody. Dr. Andrew Kim signing off for tonight.